Hello, beautiful souls. So I thought I would do a video while I'm waiting for someone going into the doctor, so the truck's not rattling everywhere. So the most important thing, the exercises you need to do when you bow to the soul, besides breath work, which the point is not to have these out-of-body experiences. It's to calm your body. So you don't need to go into deep, in-depth type of work unless you're beyond the stage where you've already had the internal union, because the internal union itself is like a hug and a calming effect continually whenever you tune into the center. So that is most important. Getting your energy level to a place that helps you be calm if you're a very nervous person or if you're under attack, which is what I had to go through when I was learning. Basically, that's the most important thing, is learning how to soothe and calm the self, to sit alone and to focus on the center. And, it's the same thing as with meditating. When your mind goes off everywhere, you just keep putting it physically back to the center. So I know there are a lot of supposedly better heart-opening ceremonies and things you can do to feel what this feels like, but I'm talking about keeping it there. And in order to keep it there and activate it, besides calming down, is to keep the energy and the mind in the center. I used to talk about it as baptizing the head continually every day in that soul space. What you're doing is you're keeping the mind on the soul, which is water. So we call it baptism in some circles, some belief systems, some languages. So this union of opposites does not in any way, shape, or form have to come through taking on spirits as mystery schools teach. It might get you there faster. Majority of the time it gets you trapped in never getting out of the fourth dimensional Plato's cave hole thing. You have to deal with the fourth dimension, which they think is some kind of hero's journey or valor or award thing. And then, you know what that does? It plays with and on your ego. So there's no need for that. And also, if you have outward devotions, I talk about cutting off all pendulums, which I'm sorry is super important, because you're not going to get rid of false constructs unless you eliminate everything and go into the center, because you're trying to see your center as God, as your angels, mentors, guides, thought forms, because that's where everything arises from. And that's the whole point in cutting off all the egregore and pendulum, which takes stillness and quietness. And I shared before, I used to lay on my left-hand side kind of in a ball and just imagine I was in an egg. In an egg, you don't know anything, you don't think about anything. And this takes time. You can't just shut off your brain. You also can politely ask your thoughts and brain, can you please calm down, and can you please go over there to the side, because we're going to take a rest and we just want to, focus on our center. And you can do that. You can ask your mind things. You tell it things and suggest it things all the time. So you can do that. It's logical. But for me, it was early in the morning when you first wake up, or you're in that state where you're half asleep, half awake, as the Christian Bible, which I say mysteries teach, is that in the morning on your bed, the first thing when you're waking up, you're in that zone, or that they call the alpha, beta, gamma, whatever, delta rays, vibrations of where your brain is. So you're in this space where you're calm and highly suggestive. And that's often when you'll fall into a sleep and have these sort of semi-awake sleep dreams, and don't worry about it. If you fall asleep, it's not the end of the world. The point is to calm yourself down. So if you can get alone or go on a vacation or like vacation and fast and do this, it's going to bring it on much quicker than if you're having to do your daily work or your place as a parent or your job, whatever. It's just the more time you have in peace and quiet, like think of going on a retreat, that's going to be the quickest way to bring these things about. So why do you have to cut off all the egregore or the pendulums or the belief? And I talk about, read the book Tufti the Priestess, which I think is just, if you need all the logic, whatever, it's going to take you down a lot of rabbit holes. But point being, if nothing outside of you exists that you're putting your focus on, like the government and the way America's going to poop literally before our face, and we think we're getting terrorists, but we're literally actually just being reorganized by the elite. The whole point is to tank the economy, to get the people out, so they should be glad they're getting out, because America's gonna see some major change and loss. And so if you're focusing on all those things on a daily basis, and not just you, your heart center, and yourself, which in the longest run is going to provide you with the most energy and the most ability to get ahead in life and get where you want to go, if that's out of the country or it's just a higher spiritual realm, it's most important. So egregoric thought forms are the things that are blabbing and racing in your head all the time. And you would be surprised, even though they have nothing to do with what you're thinking, that their basis is these things you've been taught by society and the petri dish and the family and your culture. Not saying culture's wrong, saying in this instant it needs to be put aside with the ego, so that you can practice these things that are going to heal your mind body, so that you can have the connection. So like for me, what I'm continuing to do as I bow to my soul daily and try, even when I'm driving, to keep my focus in my center, pushing a grocery cart, focus in my center. And I get out of that. I get busy with the world, and I was helping my daughter, and my daughter was tanking me, and I was taking my focus onto her life and her problems and not mine, and I had to learn to let go of all that. So for me, I didn't have really anyone or any major distractions in my life at all anymore, because I'm healing, still healing. Like I've had so many viruses in a row now that now I'm having to take a lot of antimicrobial bacterials, which things I'll share, but it's really cleaning my colon out. And with the virus that I got recently, basically like everything's going through me right now. So I have to stabilize, still get these meds in me, switch the meds up, because your body can have too strong of reactions when you're using the same thing all the time. So my focus, besides meditation right now, is healing my body, because as I've shared before, as this heart chakra's conglomerate, the yin yang, male female polarity, and inner child kind of all bind, which, as I've said before, inner child focus is the heart, is the soul, in cleaning all those past damaged selves up. Whatever level you believe that is, the quickest way is bowing to the soul. So as you do that, and the soul energy expands, and it changes the life force, and which changes the blood and purifies the blood, then you're going to have to focus on the cleaning up of the body, depending how deep of a state your body needs cleansing. Your spirit is going to do that as your chi and energy, your spirit moves through your body, because these chakras are aligned. And a great time to do it now is when the chakras up there are aligning, because the fourth dimension aligns in order to create its own little war or its own change of seasons and times, which we saw, in the 2000s. And this time period we were supposed to go to, Christians and a lot of people said were the end times. And, if you know me, I believe all that already happened. I mean, Rome was wiped out the same time, right after, congruent with when it wiped out Christianity. Christians had their rapture, so to speak, and then the Roman wasn't put off to 463 years later. It was all destroyed by these cataclysmic events that we call in Christianity, they call the revelations, the end times, the Christ return, whatever. And then those kingdoms are all wiped out, and then his kingdom is set up. Now, whatever you want to consider that kingdom, it was for that time. I am not saying that it was a time of peace, but it was a time of internal heart chakra peace, okay? Without the parasites, without the illusions of the satanic and all this Luciferian crap that is America and the satanic age, which is the Illuminati, which is, of course, in every government and every people and everyone, everything. The Illuminates are in control, and they don't care about us as human beings. So this is the thing that's wiped out, the black magicians and the old corrupt elite in these times. So Christians, with what they believe, think it was not the revelation time. And I know I'm getting into biblical stuff, but the point being is that it's important to cut off all these egregore. So as you do cut off egregore, you begin to see a world around you. Now, for me, it was ziggurat and finding Roman structures and finding literal castles that had been torn down and reused for building materials that were done all over the world. And we were told the huge Roman buildings and Greek buildings all over the place, all over this world, were just temples dug up by Mormons or built by Mormons in the middle of deserts and nowhere with no materials. They just took wagons out there and built these buildings. Give me a break. That's nonsensical. And then during the World's Fairs, they said they built these gigantic places, which they didn't. They tore down most of the stuff. And we still see some of our Greco-Roman buildings that are left that would have been left behind and restructured. But people, they want to believe the lies they've been fed about time, which I recommend Gunnar Hines. And then you can look into the phantom time theory. And some people only believe there was phantom time theory within that Kali Yuga that was not a horrible low energy time, but it was actually a time of enlightenment in my book. And then the Dvarpa Yuga, which those who worship 4D are hiding, was 1,200 years on this side, of the wheel after Kali. So after that reign, when the Byzantine Empire was taken over and crushed by the Turks, which is in my family line. I've shared before that that the guy they called Dracula, which was Vlad the Impaler, which there are multiple stories. So, you might believe he's evil, horrible, whatever, but he was fighting the end of an empire, and he was used by multiple families in this time of where the energy was ditching, where he was used by both sides, and it was religious nationalism that had taken over by that point. And, two families, these kings and queens of this time, fallen nature people, they used him, to do their bidding till he didn't believe in any religion anymore. He lost his wife, and then he went into seclusion. Now, some people say he lived forever. Why? Because he came from a time period where people would have lived without illness or sickness or decay or mold or rot for 1,000 years, just like Moses said that they did when they came out of Egypt. Now, on the other side of the Yuga wheel, which I make fun of myself because I call Tetra, I call tratra, treta, and a traitor, and I call it Tartaria. So in my head, I've got all these words and I mix them all up and I just laugh at myself because that's how I've been my whole life. And that's just part of having too much stuff in your head. So you have to laugh at yourself because people are so serious about their religions and belief systems. And I know from direct experience that none of it is real and none of it is exactly what we think. So there were also 1,000 years added on the right-hand side of the wheel and the right-hand side of Judean history, Chaldean history, and all that stuff is spread out over 900 to 1,000 years, and it's really not. It really happened in a lot less time. So if you take 1,200, 1,012 years or 1,012 years, something like that, out of each side of the Dvarpa, which would have been the fall of each side, the Shaitan and Luciferian ages, then things began to balance out and make sense. And I didn't realize just till this week that Gunnar Hines actually proved that side of the puzzle too, which I studied years and years and years ago with the whole Christianity, revelations, and archaeological finds, because I studied that my whole life because I'd wanted to be an archaeologist. Made no sense to me. And then when Gunnar Hines put it all together, I was like, but that's what I was seeing. But I thought I had to be wrong because I didn't have any conclusions except for pottery. Even if you look at the glazed pottery in the Americas, way out in the desert and stuff, it doesn't make sense. Someone will tell you, oh, these corn cobs are 900 years old or 1,000 years old. And it's just like, no, that's ridiculous. That's not the truth. It's just, and then you're like, well, carbon dating. Well, when there's massive warfare and places have been melted and there's melted structures from the time of the revelations or the end age cataclysmic events, and there's melted buildings and stuff all over the world, and now people are just coming to see these things and making all kinds of videos about, excuse me, I got the hiccups. They're making all kinds of videos about them. It doesn't make sense. And the Jews, literally, they'll say, like, the world's like 3,600 something years old. But then when you look at their other calendar, they've added on 2,000 years. So how does that make any sense? They're doing it because the educated Kabbalion type Jewish people have hid all this stuff, and the elites and all these people who aren't really a religion. They just use black magic and mind control, and they don't worship any one God, and they think we're idiots for worshiping any one God because they worship what they worship, themselves in natural order, and they're the gods. They're the Lucifers and the Satans, and we're all the stupid idiots who don't get what's right in front of our face. So if all that stuff would have happened, which some, I think, full preterism is what Christians call it. They think everything already happened and that everything went back to God. Well, I think that's the end of the Yuga wheel, which would be the full 12,600 years, which we have not completed yet. And I've seen a bunch of people online saying, oh, it's the end of this whatever year period and the whole earth's going to go to poop and whatever. If it does, it doesn't matter. So then how would you go to heaven? You would just go back to God. Well, you would just not lie and you'd live an ascetic lifestyle, and eventually your body would do all those things it needs to so that you could go back to that time. So I'm going to end the video here because my daughter's getting in my truck.